Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Real Up Productions, and we are back as part of our new 2024 schedule. Now, it's been a few weeks, but as you may recall, the last time we got together, we discussed my favorite personal Christmas movie, or at least my favorite. Most people aren't going to bring it up, Christmas movie, and that is Gremlins. I did promise that there was a sequel and that we would get to it one day, so I figured let's go ahead and get to it now. Yep, that's right, folks. We're going to discuss Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Let's go ahead and get the nitty-gritty hard data out of the way. Gremlins 2, The New Batch is a 1990 American comedy horror film directed by Joe Dante, written by Charles S. Hawes, with creature designs by Rick Baker. Zach Galligan, Phoebe Cates, Dick Miller, Jackie Joseph, and Key Luke reprised their roles from the first film. New cast members include John Glover, Robert Prosky, Robert Picardo, and Christopher Lee, along with many others, including Tony Randall providing the voice for one of the Gremlins, which we will get to in a moment. The film is, of course, as we said before, a sequel, and was distributed by Warner Brothers. Ranks in at 106 minutes, and with a budget of 30 to 50 million, made 41.5 million at the initial box office. The movie did perform less well at the box office than the original. However, it did go on to become quite a good movie here, and has been shown around the world, having become a cult classic. So what is Gremlins 2 about? Well, as you would expect by the title of The New Batch, we do get a new group of antagonistic gremlins. The biggest thing to note about this movie is the thematic feel and tone of the movie compared to the original. The original movie is, in many ways, a comedy horror satire of Christmas movies. You know, the idea was to take something that people generally associate with good feelings and good times like Christmas and juxtapose it with a invasion by murderous creatures. Whereas, while Gremlins 2 does feature some horror elements, it veers much more into the comedy. The movie itself actually serves in many ways as a satire of the first movie and its horror convention roots. This is done intentionally by Joe Dante. Dante originally did not want to make a sequel, as he felt that Gremlins had done everything it needed to do, and thus the sequel would only meant to be profitable. However, the studio, having the right to do so, began work on Gremlins 2 without him, with various ideas falling through and nobody really being able to get a good idea going that the studio had confidence in. Thus, the studio went back to Joe Dante and asked him to do it again, which he finally did after receiving the rare promise of having complete creative control over the movie, and received a budget triple that of the original film. Dante himself acknowledged that with these delays in getting started, a lot of time had passed between the films, thus he was taking a risk of reduced public interest. These days, such a thing sounds insane. I mean, again, let's look at this, folks. The original movie came out in 1984. This movie came out in 1990. There was only about a 6-year gap between making the movies. These days, we're making movies that are sequels to movies that had come out, 15, 20 years, sometimes more before. Not to mention, hey, follow-up TV shows. Saying 6 years passing between movies now would not be as big a deal, but back then it was. There was a lot of more new stuff coming, and audiences tended to expect sequels to be put out in pretty rapid order. Still, one of those things that it was a concern at the time. Dante himself referred to it as one of the more unconventional studio pictures ever, and intentionally included materials he believed Warner Bros. Would not have allowed had they not wanted a sequel to Gremlins, and given him the kind of creative control and freedom that allowed him to break a number of rules in filmmaking. Joe Dante himself has claimed that this was the film to which he'd put the most of his personal influence, serving as, we said before, not only a satire of Gremlins, but sequels in general. There is various meta references and self-referential humor in the movie as part of this satire of Gremlins and sequels. This has led to various cameos, the most infamous of which being an appearance by film critic Leonard Maltin, during which, in a fictional version of his movie review show, he denounces the original Gremlins, as he had initially done in reality, and in fact quoted his original real-life review before the Gremlins themselves cut short his rant by attacking him, and him declaring under this attack that, no, on the other hand, Gremlins is a wonderful movie. It should be noted in real life, the reason Leonard Maltin did this cameo is because even the part of him, under duress, mind you, rolling back his review of Gremlins did reflect reality. After his initial scathing review, and it being one of the harshest reviews done by a major critic, he was contacted by Joe Dante, who, upon explaining a little more about what he wanted to do with the movie and a perspective on watching the movie that Leonard Maltin had clearly not taken if you looked at his in-depth review, Maltin himself agreed to rewatch the movie, keeping in mind that it was, in many ways, a dark humor satire of classic holiday movies and those tropes, at which point he did post a more positive review. Thus, he's willing to do this cameo, which good-naturedly pokes fun at his changing minds about the original movie. Plus, it also shows how Joe Dante wasn't going to take this stuff too seriously. Yes, he had already gotten Maltin to change his mind about the original movie, but it was still an experience he was willing to make fun of. Additionally, there's a scene later in the movie. I know we're kind of spoiling stuff, going a little bit out of order, but hey, this is the beauty of the Roulette Productions and the Friday Rambling is it's rambling. It's not always done the same template every time. Later on, Billy's trying to explain the rules regarding the Mogwai and the do's and don'ts involving them to staff in the building. The staff finds them quite absurd and points out various logic holes in the nature of the rules, including conducting a classic thought experiment about what would happen if a Mogwai was traveling and moved between time zones when looking at the Don't Feed After Midnight rule. Because, of course, the original, taking some nods from horror movies, had a little skewed logic. But it was all in good fun. It was internal logic. Didn't hurt the first movie, but Dante was willing to point out, yeah, guys, those rules kind of don't work in reality if you take the movie and its rules too seriously. The greatest of all meta jokes, though, happen to be when, during the course of the movie, the Gremlins seemingly take control of the theater that you would be watching Gremlins 2 in, essentially stopping the movie that you're watching. Now that's a classic meta joke. Ultimately, they engage in shadow puppetry and replace the movie with the vintage made for adults and their occasionally perverted tastes film Volleyball Holiday. This prompts Hulk Hogan to make a cameo appearance as an audience member and intimidate the Gremlins into running the rest of Gremlins 2 via a classic wrestling Hulk Hogan promo. The joke was inspired by a similar stunt in William Castle's film The Tingler. We have spoken of William Castle in some of our Halloween ramblings, and his various gimmicks he would use in theater to enhance the horror experience. Now, when the film did make its debut on home video, the filmmakers initially replaced the scene to make it seem as if the viewer's VCR had been broken by the Gremlins. And their antics were stopped when, after queuing up the classic film Chisholm, John Wayne forces the Gremlins into continuing the film. Because, of course, Chisholm is a Western starring John Wayne. So, the fictional John Wayne recognized you're not supposed to be watching his movie, made the Gremlins put on the original. Most current home video releases are going to show the original Hulk Hogan theater one, which kind of works more because, you know, you can't really get the same effect on things like DVD or streaming. The original version of the film was longer, but executive producer Steven Spielberg claimed there were too many Gremlins and several scenes were cut as a result. Most of these scenes can be found on most of your DVD releases, because that was one of the glories of the DVD format, is the deleted scenes. Say was, I mean, it's still around. You get them on Blu-ray too, but, you know, people love their streaming. It's one of the things I think we're losing with streaming versus the DVD Blu-ray format is the extras. Still, this brings us around to what is your actual plot of the movie. Basic plot of the movie is that your main heroes, Kate and Billy, have, besides gotten together romantically, moved to New York City, where Billy attempts to make it big as an artist. In this case, he is working for the very corporate character of Daniel Clamp, played by John Glover, doing preview art for various new projects that the Clamp Company is working on and getting ready to start. Not a bad gig. Here's the fun of it, though. Because the movie was made in 1990 in the early 90s and really started in the late 80s, was marked by a time of real push towards new technology in people's day-to-day lives, including questionable technology as far as how convenient it actually is. The Clamp building is what is a smart building, having various sensors and computer automated controls that allegedly improve the efficiency of it, but can also make it a pain in the butt to work in. Kind of like a lot of modern homes that want to run everything through your smartphone. Oh yeah, I'm just going to have a phone that's going to control every single solitary little thing that involves electricity in my house. You know what? That's how you get Skynet. You people clearly did not watch enough science fiction in your life. But personal rants aside, it wouldn't be a Gremlins movie without Gizmo, who is once again voiced by Howie Mandel. Now, as you might remember if you did watch the original movie, as I recommended, Gizmo did return to the loving care of old Chinese man, Mr. Wing, played by Key Luke, the icon, the legend. Unfortunately, Mr. Wing is old and does die, but only after making a repeated refusal to sell his business and the property it sits on to the Clamp Company, who wants to build a updated, touristy, forward-thinking, tech-friendly Clamp Chinatown. With his death, though, there is nothing standing in their way. Gizmo escapes from the deconstruction of the original building that Mr. Wing's business was in, only to be kidnapped by a mad scientist. Luckily, the mad scientist himself works in Clamp headquarters, Clamp Towers, as various sections of the building are rented out to different businesses. This is where our old horror friend Christopher Lee comes in, as he is the head scientist of this laboratory, which specializes in DNA manipulation, a hot topic in the early 90s. Long story short, not spoiling super much of the movie, Billy ends up finding out that Gizmo is held captive in this lab on a different floor of the building from where Billy works. Billy rescues Gizmo. The two friends reunite. However, after regular business hours ends, Gizmo is left behind because Billy has to go to a meeting with his immediate supervisor, Marla, who has some apparently amorous ideas towards Billy. And in that subsequent time, Gizmo's exposed to water. More Mogwai spawn. They are just as wicked and mischievous as the ones from the first movie. And after imprisoning Gizmo in the air vents, go wild across the building. They manage to feed themselves after midnight, become gremlins, and after wrecking a few other things, cause the sprinkler systems to hit where they're hanging out at. Thus, we get another gremlin army. This is where the movie is, in a lot of ways, kind of interesting, because in order to keep down the production costs of shooting all over New York City and give the movie a bit of that claustrophobic, trapped with the threat feel, all of the action and mayhem takes place inside the Clamp building. We also meet various other characters contained inside the building, including horror host Uncle Fred. Grandpa Fred, blah blah blah, played by Robert Prosky. In what is a essentially parody of the Grandpa Munster character from the iconic TV show The Munsters, except a bit meta, because we see Grandpa Fred playing the character and also just being himself as a frustrated older actor stuck hosting cheesy old horror movies on a late night cable show. Now we're going to get the part that's going to sound, it's going to get just a little bit into politics, a little teeny bit into politics. See, we've mentioned Clamp before. We've mentioned his various businesses. Daniel Clamp, as we said, played by John Glover, is a pretty obvious parody of two men. And this is where things get a bit political. I'm going to try to, skim through this, because we don't do a lot of politics here. Don't want to divide the audience. Don't want to make anybody feel defensive or offensive. One of those, especially Daniel Clamp's most ruthless money-making, everything can be branded endeavors, is Donald Trump. I said it. Let's go forward from here. Let's not discuss any of his behavior since 1990 and how you feel about it sociopolitically. It's just needless to say, Donald Trump was a known entity at that time, and thus was a good inspiration for a satirical look at a businessman who's always looking to make a buck. The other is, at least this has always been my personal opinion, Ted Turner. In that, Clamp runs his own news network. Ted Turner, of course, started CNN, the world's first 24-hour news network, as well as the various other TV shows that were filmed in the building that he mentioned, or that we mentioned, the Grandpa Fred show, there was a cooking show, hints about an archery style, Robin Hood type show. You know, the guy's into television, which Trump clearly was, or excuse me, where Turner clearly was. That's where Turner has made the bulk of his fortune, besides, of course, buying a couple sports teams here and there. But also in the other big, as I say, Turner-esque thing is, remember, Joe Dante was poking some fun at the movie industry in general. At the time this was made, Warner Brothers, who was distributing the film and paying for it, was in the midst of negotiating for a merger with Turner Entertainment. See where I'm going? Everybody at Warner Brothers was keeping an eye on this merger and what it would mean for their company to be merged to create a megacorp, which of course we do know happened, and they later merged with AOL, which is a whole different story, not relevant to this movie review. So, Turner was a good guy for somebody at Warner Brothers who was looking to be a little passive-aggressive and satirical-minded, a little wicked sense of humor to include in this. See where I'm going here? The other big thing is in the nature of the Clamp building. Besides the fact that it did host the television connection, the Clamp building also had regular tours, a food court, which is how the Gremlins managed to feed themselves after midnight. It was as much, at least certain floors of the building, was a tourist destination, which, if anybody's ever been to Atlanta knows, Turner's classic corporate headquarters, the CNN Center, has for a long time been as well. I have been there. It does have a food court connected to it. It does have certain areas of it that are open to tourists. You see, there is connections. The good news is that Daniel Clamp is a good man at heart, and when he realizes what is going on to his building and that the lives of various employees and a few tourists is being threatened, he does get off his duff and working with Billy, the expert at getting rid of gremlins, as well as his head of security, Mr. Forrester, Clamp helps shut everything down and save the day. Now, I'm not going to get into the super details of this. The last thing I'm really going to throw at you, because I do really want you to see this movie. It is a fun, hilarious, at times creepy movie. As I said, it's got some of the best meta humor that Hollywood's ever worked in. The satirical pokes at Warner Brothers, Turner Entertainment, and various other aspects of the entertainment industry, and the idea of horror sequels, and that the more you make, the more nonsensical and ridiculous they inherently become, no matter how hard you try. Especially when you're dealing with monsters as your horror element. It's a lot of good fun to people who don't take their movies too seriously. That is at the aforementioned genetics lab run by Mr. Christopher Lee here. The Gremlins do break into, and several of them do mutate. This is where the aforementioned Tony Randall comes in, because one gremlin manages to get its hands on an intelligence-boosting serum and mutates into a nice suit-wearing, glasses-wearing, English-speaking, so-called brain gremlin, which is voiced by Tony Randall. He in turn ends up becoming the de facto leader of the Gremlins army and keeps them somewhat mildly organized as he prepares for them to eventually escape the plant building and take over New York City. Fortunately, the good guys do get together and the day is saved, thanks to them outsmarting the Gremlins at their own chaos-loving game. Again, I'm not going to get you the details. Why? Because we don't want to give you too many spoilers. We want you to watch this movie. We don't want you to watch this review and go, well, I guess there's no point in me seeing the movie because I know everything that happens. We have left out a ton of great stuff. I've just given you just that little bit of tease. Various mutant gremlins. Lots of fun with Gizmo, who thanks to the little bit of higher budget, is able to do a lot more work as a puppetry-based creation. We get to see him run around. We get to see him engage in a little combat of his own as he tries to protect the world, and especially his buddy Billy, from the Gremlin menace. Check it out one time, won't you? In fact, maybe see it twice to make sure you catch all the jokes. In short, this movie is as highly recommended as the original, though for slightly different reasons. As I said, the movie carries a bit more of a comedic, Looney Tunes inspired influence to the Gremlins' mischievous antics. You know, where the first one was kind of a comedy horror even keel, this one's like that much comedy, that much horror. Comedy, horror. Still got enough for horror fans to have a chuckle at some of the conventions of their genre and get an occasional quick moment of ooh, creepy. But everybody's going to find at least one joke to laugh at. And when it's all said and done, it gives you a great look at what sequels used to be about. Yes, the movie was made to make money, but when push came to shove, Joe Dante said, if I'm coming back, I'm going to deconstruct my own movie, and I'm going to push the limits of just how much I can get away with, and Warner Brothers actually still put this movie out. Yep, gotta love old Joe Dante. That man did push the envelope when he could legally get away with it. Thus, we bid you adieu, but we will be back next month. We got a little bit more movie talk. Gonna be a little different this time. Gonna be another franchise breakdown, but it will be fun. So I hope you enjoy. And I hope you enjoy our lighter schedule. Please, as always, like, subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell, and leave whatever comments you want, good, bad, or indifferent. If you really want to see something, especially since we got some less videos this year to work with, please make suggestions. I will always seriously consider any suggestion, but do remember that here at Roulette Productions, we will always sit by the standard of we enjoy our entertainment. I'm not going to review something that I absolutely despise. I'm not going to sit there and cut angry heel promo style rants on anything. Even if I don't personally like the movie, I do respect the hard work that was put into it by the people involved in making the movie. I respect the fact they tried something. Whether or not they succeeded is a different matter. And most importantly, a lot of different people have different tastes. There's movies I can't stand that are actually really popular. And there's movies I love that most people have no use for. So, if you do choose to make a suggestion, keep that in mind. That I may not use your suggestion, but it's not because it was a bad suggestion or I'm not truly open to them. It's because it was something I felt I really couldn't tackle while keeping the integrity of the channel and the Friday Ramblings intact. But I'll be happy to explain to you why I did or did not like your suggestion. Respectful dialogues are always appreciated. Until I see you next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay entertained. Bye-bye, folks.